Everyone. I think you can hear me well. We have already a few people that joined us. Thanks again for taking some time for our webinar regarding the post certification in France and how we can help here at Fiskaly. I'm Pierre. I'm business development manager. I specialize for the French market, and I'm with Malina today.
Hi, good morning. We don't see you, but yeah, nice that you take some time to watch our webinar.
Yeah, thanks again. And to kick things off, we'll give a bit more context about Fiskaly in case you don't know us already. So we are specializing in fiscalization solutions across Europe. And today we'll be talking about our newest market, specifically in France. So as you see, and you probably know, we are already present in many other countries, especially in Germany and Austria, where we were founded in 2019. Our main market still remains Germany, where we are number one for the cloud-based fiscalization solution. And that means that we have now 200,000 businesses in Europe that work with all of our API solutions. And that makes it so that now we are at about 1 million active POS that are integrated also with these solutions. So essentially what we help is POS provider, PMS system wants to comply with local regulations to make sure that they can comply easily. And that will be the target for today. Agenda is specifically on France. First, to understand the certification landscape and to understand how it's going there, because the regulatory landscape has changed recently. So we'll dive into this. We'll talk also about the new timeline that POS provider have. And also in third, we'll go about on the key technical requirements that vendor must have to comply. We have a few checklists also for the top 5 mistakes to avoid when tackling the certification process, which is a big part of the French journey that comes with getting compliant for POS systems. A few tips and tricks also to achieve compliance more easily. And then we'll have time to review your questions. So you have a chatbot directly here. So feel free to put your questions there whenever you have time, and we'll review them at the end of this presentation. Now, as a first, to understand the POS certification landscape in France in 2026, France has basically implemented fiscalization since 2018 already. But before then, there were two compliance options. One was the self-certification, meaning that the POS provider could adopt a template to give to their end customer to say that they would be completely compliant, which was more easy, I would say, for POS provider to comply. And the other option since 2018 was also to get certified by a third-party agency. The two-party certification agency, are LNE and InfoCert. So already a few POS providers have done the certification process since then. And the February 2025 Financial Act state that now the self-certification option is not, it's ending. So that makes the only other option, getting certified, mandatory. Why is France doing it? Eventually, it's the same as any other countries, is to prevent fraud. And why specifically going through an agency and an auditing status? This is very French, let's say. French love audits, but it's also to make sure that all the players on the market are meeting the same standards, and they respect the ISCA principle of the transaction integrity, the security, the traceability of the transaction. And it applies basically to any POS provider that are present in France or have live POS currently in France. In case, what's planned is that once mandatory, the taxpayers could be fined for 7,500 euros for the first fine if ever they use a POS system that is not considered compliant and which is not certified. So that's what's in the plan past the deadline. So I said every POS software must basically guarantee that the transactions are inalterable, secured, conserved, and archived. And this is what at Fiskaly, our system and our API is able to help you with. And this is also what every certifying agency will just really put an emphasis on, is really this ISCA principle for any types of transaction or any type of functionality that you can have. So those are the most important aspect and principle to keep in mind. Which brings us also to the new timeline, which has changed quite recently, actually, to get certified in France. So as said, it was in August 31st this year. This was the last deadline where POS provider had to formally state that they have started the certification process to be able to continue to operate on the market. With the aim in mind to have in March 1st, all POS provider being certified. Now, this deadline of March 1st was actually pushed to September 1st, 2026, which is the last deadline where all the certification will need to be addressed. Or if you want to enter in the market later on, you will go through the certification process and then be able to be compliant to enter the market. So there's a bit more time, let's say, to get certified with September 1st, 2026 in mind. But as we'll see also with Malina, the process can be a bit long. So it's important to start now. Because, yeah, the preparation is critical. There's long queues. There's only 2 accredited certification bodies, LNE and InfoCert. The process is long, from 5 to 6 months in general, and this makes it a long time to market. So it's really important to basically start now to make sure that you can address the market in time before September 2026. And I will let Malina also give more information about the technicalities of it.
Thank you very much, Pierre. So we will now take a bit of a deeper look into what does that all mean for the technical requirements. Pierre already mentioned it. There's these so-called ISCA conditions or ISCA principles that need to be upheld and need to be taken into account, let's say. So ISCA is an abbreviation for inalterability, security, conservation, and archiving. We've also heard that before, but what does that now mean for the particular topic that we discuss? When we talk about inalterability, that means in a nutshell that all transaction data must not be altered in any way. It means that there are fully traceable corrections, for example, and of course, by keeping the inalterability principle, this guarantees that the data is it guarantees the data integrity and the transparency for audits. The second one is security. Here we talk about the fact that data is basically protected from any unauthorized access or modification. When we talk about security, we also talk about digital signatures, encryption, and controlled user access, and of course also the linkage between all the transactions. The third principle is about conservation. That means that the transactions are securely stored for a defined period. There's monthly, daily, and annual closings. And of course, this also means that the data is easily retrievable and verifiable during any audit. The last of the principles is about archiving. When you use our solution, we will store the data for a period of 7 years in an unalterable format. That also means continued auditability even after a couple of years. And of course, it also safeguards both the vendor and the merchants. Let's now have a look at things you should avoid. And therefore, we prepared 5 top mistakes that you should not be doing in order to get you ready for the whole certification process. Mistake number 1, obviously, is not being prepared at all. Keep in mind that the certification is a structured process and it's a long process. That means we highly recommend you to start early with the planning, take enough time to fulfill all the design, documentation, and audit expectations. And of course, our pro tip is to find a good partner to guide you, which you will find in us, because we will guide you throughout the entire process. Another mistake that should be avoided is to underestimate the requirements. To be frank, it is a bit of a pain because the documentation required is quite comprehensive and very complex. And each of the 4 ISCA conditions that we just talked about have multiple further technical checks. So here again, we highly recommend you to keep that in mind. And we are also, as Fiskaly will be acting as a sort of a middleware, we of course also have to have our own documentation. We already prepared all that, so we can also give you really good guidance in this case. The third one is to treat the certification as something you can simply put in a box and check it once you did it. That's not how it goes, because the initial audit is of course the most comprehensive one. But please also keep in mind that there's annual recertifications that have to be performed. So there's going to be an audit even after the initial audit. And the fourth mistake is poor documentation. Having inconsistent documentation on your POS or PMS is not sufficient. So it really has to be it has to cover every requirement, and the documentation is as critical as the technical solution itself. So it means it will take you some time to prepare everything, to get all the documentation and so on and so forth. So please also keep that in mind. And again, here we will help you anytime in terms of documentation too. And last but not least is, of course, postponing is never good. And that's why we highly recommend you also to get started right away, as soon as possible. Pierre also mentioned that. Just think about it. There's only 2 certification bodies. And now you can think about the amount of POS providers. So that means that possibly there's going to be some waiting time for the audit to be performed. And the whole process, the whole certification process takes it takes time. It could be a few months actually. And to give you a bit of a better understanding of that, we are actually sharing the LNE optimal timeline. So what they would like is to have all the documentation acceptances by the end of February 2026. And this way, they would have all the initial audits done by the end of May 2026, because it could be that there's some parts that are contested, that are not good enough. And this also, again, takes some more time to add all the documentation, add all the information. So that's why they would foresee to have the initial audits completed already by the end of May 2026. And then in order, if there's any additional audits, they would like to have them finished by end of June 2026. There is also a complete guide about this topic that you will be able to there's going to be a clickable link. You can click there and can download the guide. That being said, I would hand back to Pierre to give you a better understanding about how to achieve compliance easily.
Yeah, thanks, Malina. So how to achieve compliance easily? Of course, we have design a solution and a seamless cloud API to take care of the certification challenge, and in the name of SignFR and Safe. Basically, SignFR will take care about the inalienability, the conservation principles that we addressed prior, and Safe will address the 7-year archiving, which are our two products to make sure you can be fully compliant. So as said, SignFR is our solutions for signing, cryptographic chaining, and ensure traceability of the data. We can manage a large amount of signatures, and then also the same API basically works for the conservation of all the data and all the transactions, every possible checked activity also, which are specific events that are required for InfoCert. In French also, what is required is the daily, weekly, and monthly closing, also the grand totals, to make sure that you can be compliant. This is required in the law, and which is also verified during the audits with the certifying agencies. And the 7-year secure archive, so the law states that the archiving needs to be done for 6 years, so we archive it even longer than this. But it's necessary also in case of later audits for your taxpayers or your customers as POS provider. If they have themselves audits, they will need to be able to retrieve information of potential exports of their receipts. So this is also a way to ensure that you can be compliant in this way. And that's different in any other countries in Europe, and in France, it would be 6 years. So how does it work more in practice with us? So you as a POS provider, you will need to be the one being certified. Us as Fiskaly are not certified or certifiable, let's say, because we're a middleware, but we work in parallel and make sure that you can achieve the certification that you require. So this needs to, in parallel, have the certifying journey and also the implementation of the API work together. We help you on both levels, on both fronts, to make sure that you have all the documentation ready that we also provide, which means that we need to fusion documentation because still the certifying agencies require you to have a good display of information about your architecture, your system, but all documentation basically comes for anything that relates to the ISCA principle, and it basically helps you to have more understanding and a faster way to get the documentation ready. At the same time, for SignFR and Safe, you need to implement it with the API because in the audit, you will need to pass the documentation test, but also pass some actual technical tests to make sure that the data is flowing properly and is signed properly and is chained also and hashed in a good way during the audit. So the certification bodies here, we can also liaise with them directly to make sure that you can start this process of certifying, which can be long, and there's a few back and forth and the planification of the audit dates, an audit that we need to be also part of. So we make also the relationship with the contact between you and the certification body if this is something that you will need. As said, we help you during the whole process of the certification to guide you and consult you on any question that you can have specifically regarding the documentation and the specific framework and rules that LNE and InfoCert each have. And we need to be part of the auditing process, which means that we are fully involved in the project that you can have with them. Now it comes to a point also that we would like to hear from you, and more specifically with a question to know how do you plan to proceed with the certification process as a POS provider or PMS. So normally there's a text box that should show up with a few possibilities, either if you already started the certification process and journey, or not, and which certifying agency you have chosen if you have already chosen. So I give you some bit of time to answer. That will be also very helpful for us to understand where you currently are at the moment. All right, so I see that for now, LNE also has a bit more popularity in the votes, InfoCert also, but there's a few of you also that are still evaluating or still unsure. So actually, that's maybe a good point. If you're still unsure about the differences, I don't know, Malina, if you can address this also directly, differences between LNE and InfoCert.
Yeah, we can quickly talk about that. So basically, one core difference I would say is that one of them is a public company and one of them is a private company. But of course, they have a bit of different formatting requirements. For example, here LNE is a bit more rigid, whereas InfoCert does not give you a lot of format requirements itself. InfoCert, on the other hand, is basically they develop their own set of requirements. It's called the NF525. So yeah, you can check that online. You can also have a look at both websites, see the information that you can get. So in general, I would say it's up to you which one you prefer. The the formatting is a bit different, as I mentioned, and also like the whole process. For example, for LNE, you need to fill in an initial questionnaire first before starting everything else. But that's also something where we will support you and help you, as we are in touch with both LNE and InfoCert. So we have a really good relationship, I would say, and we're in constant exchange with them. Also, if there's any particular questions. But yeah, the most important difference is that, yeah, one is public and one is private, I would say. Also, pricing is relatively similar from what we've seen so far. I don't know.
Pricing and process is pretty much similar. It's basically the framework and the way they operate, which is a bit different, especially as InfoCert is more checklist based. So you really need to state any types of fiscalization scope that is needed, which is more strict, I would say, than LNE. So I see that we already have a few questions. So Victor is asking, is it mandatory for POS or PMS provider to have a third-party signer, or it can be self-signed certificate? This is a good question. You can absolutely have and do it completely in-house if you have the possibility to encrypt and chain and sign all the receipts. Some POS provider actually don't use a third party to do it. But yeah, if you need so, we can completely help you on this, as a lot of it can be very intricate to completely respect also the framework that both InfoCert and LNE are asking, because those are still high level of requirements. And to be sure you can be compliant, you need to prove that the inalienability and the archiving principles are respected, which are a bit technical also for a POS provider to comply with sometimes. So this is not necessary, but it is this can be encouraged, because we still know that a lot of POS provider are going through middlewares for this specific request. And we see it also in Europe in general. We have a lot of POS providers that use us across Europe. So there's a need also to get some help on the technicality of the sign. Adrian is also asking, the LNE certification documentation talks about a fiscal parameter or source code, which is subject to certification and audit. What are the best means to determine the fiscal parameter boundaries? Do you have guidelines? Can you support provider with technical architecture review and determine together the fiscal parameter? Short answer is yes. basically we can give you some recommendation to do so. For LNE and specifically, those are requirements 20 and 21 to basically ensure that your fiscal scope is set, because this will then also have some impact on the versions that you'll be using in your system. So this is actually a key requirement for LNE. And I would say this is also maybe the first, I mean, those are the last requirements of LNE, but those are maybe the first question that you want to ask yourself. What needs to be fiscalized? What is the fiscal perimeter of my system? And what's to be then sent as a data towards the API if you use a middleware as us. So we can help you on this, give you also information about what you can do as an architecture level. What we recommend is having a module or a connector, basically, that will be the one being certified, to be sure that your part of the inalterability is respected, because once it reaches our system, then it's inalterable by essence and by design. So yeah, we are open also to discuss directly on another call to give you more in-depth view of all this.
I can maybe continue.
Yeah.
We have a couple more questions. We'll continue with Magnus's question. What do you think of the addendum voted last week by the Assemblée Nationale to allow the self-certification again? Wouldn't that make the need for certification obsolete? To be honest, I am not aware of this addendum. I don't know, Pierre, have you followed that? Have you heard anything about that?
I've looked at it very recently, actually, and very quickly. So in my view, this is not something, and if it shifts something, this will be for the long run. I still think at the end of the day, maybe the certification process will be changed. It can be, but as for now, as the deadline is still set in stone, the certification process is still due on a short to middle term timeline. And especially because at the end of the day, France still wants to make sure that fraud can be alleviated, and also they want to have the maximum amount of information that can flow directly towards the tax agency. So this is in line also with the e-invoicing, e-reporting requirements that will come very soon also. So it will make sense. It wouldn't make sense to actually change this process for now, but we'll give you more information once we know more about the specific change. But as for now, this remains unchanged in terms of process.
Okay, perfect. Then let's continue with Mark's question. In case of a hotel PMS, I understand that it's required to record and secure any changes of a hotel reservation itself, assumed there's no classic folio. In that case, the reservation becomes the ledger that must be recorded, ? So what we can offer you is, because you would need to define all the relevant business cases that are handled by your PMS system, and then you would need to define, okay, do these fall under the fiscalization requirements, basically. I would need a bit more background to answer your question really precisely, but in general, I would say that everything that is handled via the POS directly should be signed. So in this case, I would also argue that the reservation that you mentioned also shall be signed. But we can maybe also, after our webinar, get in touch with you to discuss this in detail. Like I mentioned, it's always good for us to also have a list of all the possible activities that can be performed via the PMS directly. Okay, then there's a question about the approximate one-time and recurring costs that should be budgeted in connection with the certification in France. So for the initial audit, if I remember correctly, we're talking about 12 to 13K. Pierre, please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it can change based on if they need to move to another country, travel fees, but yeah, it's around about 12 to 15K.
And of course, the other or the following audits are a bit cheaper, but I don't have any number in mind.
I think it's around about 3 to 4K. Again, this can change based. We will say that they always make a specific quotation based on the complexity of your POS system or the amount of documentations required. But yeah, that's pretty much the basis that we just talked about.
As we are approaching the 30 minutes mark and we still have open questions, I would say let's do 2 more. What would you say, Pierre?
Yeah, I think we can still have a bit more minutes to address them. In case we can't, we will just take them back offline and we can respond also more generally in a response, but I think we still have time. Yeah, we have a question from Jakub, which is interesting. How will invoicing change the process? Is it going to remove some extensive requirements if all data is going to be digitally transferred to the authority? So in France in particular, this doesn't change too much of the process of certification, meaning that you still need to be certified. But the e-invoicing mandate in France is coming into play in September 2026 for big corporates, and in September 2027 for smaller businesses, all businesses operating in France. So the whole question is what's considered an invoice and what's considered a receipt. Most of the POS providers are using fiscalization for the receipt, which are B2C types of transactions, which don't fall under the e-invoicing e-reporting mandate per se. Now, as a PMS, you handle still receipt, and you also, for example, handle invoices. So these invoices will still need to be reported to the tax agency. Yes, of course. There's another thing also, something called the Z ticket in France in particular will need to be reported also. But that's for later on because this will usually normally only start for most companies in September 2027. So no, this doesn't change the fiscalization part, but yes, the market has to align and is aligning right now to make sure that the e-invoicing and e-reporting mandate are respected in September 2026. Another short question also from Martin. What are the accepted language for the certification process? French only or English? Depends on the agency you're working with. LNE is requesting most of the documentation to be in French, but the audit in itself can be handled in English. And I think it's pretty much the same for InfoCert. InfoCert doesn't necessarily require the documentation to be in French, if I'm not mistaken, and the audit can be both.
Yeah, there's a particular part that InfoCert wants to have in French, but the rest can be provided in English. German is not an option, though, unfortunately. Yeah, there's 4 more. Let's see how far we can get. So the next one is regarding the signing of the documents using the Sign France API. Does Fiskaly handle the management maintenance of digital certificates? Yes. So if you use our Sign France API, you don't need to worry about signing. That will all be covered on our end. Then another question about when we should close monthly closure on the end of current month or something in the next month. If you use our solution, that's also something that we will automatically take care of. So you don't need to worry about the daily, monthly, or yearly closings. That will be, we will do that directly through the API. The next question from Magnus, you mentioned long queues and waiting time for the certification process. Do you already have customers in those queues waiting for the certification or that have passed the certification process successfully? Yes, we do in fact have already customers who are in the queue already, and we also have some customers with, it's not too many, but some of them also already have an audit date. We have not had our first audit yet, but this will be in the middle of December. I was about to say September, sorry. No, we will have the first audit with one of our customers in mid-December. All right. Okay, then there was a comment from Jakob referring to a question beforehand. And then I see another one from André. if a company doesn't receive any cash or card payments and doesn't have an e-store, does it need to be POS certified? Basically, the company does business directly with a company client such as SNCF or SFR, and invoicing is done directly with the buyers. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe this should also be discussed at a later stage, because that also seems to be involving not only B2C but B2B, if I remember correctly, because SNCF is isn't that the train?
Yeah, train
Train
company. So
company France.
so it's all a matter of is it only invoices for B2B types of transaction, or if these are considered to be receipts for B2C payments. If they are over the counter, or if your system can be considered as a cash register for B2C transactions, they need to be certified. And the level can be kind of broad to what can be considered a cash register in this sense. If it's purely 100% only invoices to a B2B system, then it's only the e-invoicing that will need to be required. And we'll address also invoicing quite shortly, because we are also at Fiskaly working on this broadly. So there will be more information coming also from our side on this. I think this completes most of the question. Thanks again for all of these. They were very interesting, and I hope we could have answered them the best way possible. Just a small caveat from our side is that we have a next webinar on December 4th, specifically about Italy, where Silvio from Fiskaly and Antonio from Dojo will talk about fiscalization and payments and the changes in Italy from January 2026. Some more information about the environment in Italy. And yeah, from myself and Malina, thanks again for joining us. If you have any other questions that we've addressed today, always feel free to reach directly to me on Malina or sales@fiskaly.com, and we'd be more than happy to answer them directly. Thanks again for your time, and we wish you then a very good end of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.